Do you have any war-specific memories of when you were a small child?
War? Yeah, I do. I remember that we had to have a coupon to get a pair of shoes, and you could only get so many shoes a year. So everybody only had one pair, and they would really get worn out. And we also saved tin cans. So when you took the food out of the cans, you'd take out the other end and mash them. So you could take them to the, send them off the tin for the war effort. Of the Second World War, we had prisoners of war soldiers that came and worked on our farm. And I remember going out and sitting by the house and watching them work. And they were blonde and white, and I couldn't figure out how they could be the enemy because they looked so much like us. We were always hearing about the Japanese, and they were dark and they were different, so they could be the enemy, but the Germans couldn't because they looked so much like we did. Had a Japanese girl in my high school, and that was like 10 years later, and she was kind of picked on, and I felt for her. And in our chemistry class, there were like 5 girls or something, and 4 of us sat on one side and she sat on the other all by herself. So one day I went and got her, brought her over to sit with us on our side. And she doesn't come to our class reunions.
Really?
Yeah, I can't imagine why. She wasn't treated very well, but I felt bad for her.
So what did the Germans guys do?
They just did, they thinned beets, I think. Went up and down the rows, and they looked over at me and saw this little blonde girl and thought, she could be one of ours. So. But
were
then
there guards there with guns?
There were guards with guns, yeah. One here and there, but.
How did you apply to get free German labor at your...
I don't know. I don't know how that worked, but we used to have Indians come and work on the farms too. We had to provide a house for them. And so we had a piece of property that had an old house on it, and if they were going to come, we would go over and clean it up and make up the beds and put some food in the house for them because they didn't have very much. I was really fascinated with their velvet clothing that they wore in the sun, that kind of, I'm sure they were hot all the time, but they wore long velvet skirts and tops. And they worked on the farm, and sometimes we had Mexicans working on the farm, and we fixed up the house for them to stay in also. So, and then one time we had a couple come from, where were they from? Denmark, I think. They had gotten out of Denmark and came to America, and they needed a family to sponsor them. So we sponsored them, and they came and they stayed in our basement. We fixed up the basement of the house for them to stay in. It was just the man and his wife, I think, and they were really nice people, but they didn't know much English. But they stayed in the basement, in the kitchen, and that was kind of interesting too. We never heard too much, well, I didn't hear too much about it because I was too young probably, but I'm sure they told my parents the story about their escape and everything.
Hmm.